On the mystic path, we create our own light, and at first we struggle blind and baffled, seeing nothing, hearing nothing, unable to think, unable to imagine. We seem deserted by dream, vision, or inspiration, and our meditation barren altogether. But let us persist through weeks or months, and sooner or later that stupor disappears. Our faculties readjust themselves and do the work we will them to do. Never did they do their work so well. The dark caverns of the brain begin to glow luminous. We are creating our own light. George William Russell.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone, to Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle offered by Still and Moving Center on these Saturday afternoons. We had the exception 2 weeks ago of instead meeting on a Sunday afternoon by way of attending our Still and Moving Center Diwali festival, and we got to see an enactment of the Ramayana for a couple hours with that. So we are very happy to be traveling now back to India for this week's theme of living simply. And that is this week's theme in the almanac. And to look at that theme, we feel so privileged to have as our presenter for today, Dr. Prakashji Tyagi. He's not only a medical doctor, he is in charge of the Indian nonprofit called Gravis, which is a Gandhian nonprofit. He was born into this life. His parents started the nonprofit as devotees of Gandhi's who wanted to make sure that the poor of Rajasthan, India, were properly taken care of, and in very Gandhian ways. Gravis now serves over 3 million individuals in that area. With this idea of living simply and the principles of non-possession, for example, that Gandhi lived by, we feel that this is a very appropriate way of observing this theme of living simply. I got a chance to meet, which I never have in person yet, gotten a chance to meet Prakashji. I did get to meet his mother, Sasiji, on a couple of occasions. And even though their organization must handle very large sums of rupees to be, taking care of people in that many different areas, she certainly lived a very simple life. She traveled dressed in not one of the gorgeous, Indian silk saris that we had our performers costume in for Diwali, for example, and that we admire. So many beautiful Indian women being dressed in, but just a simple cotton sari, unadorned. She gifted me with a handmade wool shawl by one of the women's workshops in her area, and took it right off her shoulders to gift it to me. Just a wonderful, wonderful woman who lived her talk of living simply. So we're very fortunate that Prakashji is going to join us today and tell us a little bit more of these Gandhian ideas of living simply, and perhaps the idea of non-possession. Prakash?
Thank you, Renée. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. It's a great pleasure to be back on this circle. I have been here several times. I have shared my perspectives a few times. And then I was here when Morris talked about trusteeship some time ago. So I'm going to take from the conversation where Morris left, because there are a lot of common ideas between trusteeship and what I'm going to talk today. I will share my experience drawn from my own life, as Renée was just saying about my parents, my family, what kind of family life I have had, and how simplicity has been an educator for me, and then how do we work on this principle following the Gandhian ideology. So I was born in a family which believed in simplicity in early 1970s, and some of you would have come across this concept of ashram, and Hindi word, which is an ancient word, but Gandhi did a lot of experimentations around ashrams. An ashram is basically a kind of a campus, a group of families who believe in common ideologies, or neighborhood would be probably an English equivalent. But the ideas, the ideologies is the binding force behind people who live in an ashram. And I was born in such a place in eastern India, where my parents were working for tribal populations, tribal communities, extremely impoverished. And while I spent my very early years of my life, I still have some very vivid memories of how the life was, what was simplicity, how the needs were very, very minimal, and how the bonds were very, very deep between the people who used to live there. And the cause with which they were living was the most important thing, to work for the communities, to work for the tribal populations. When I turned about 6 in late 1970s, my parents decided to move to another part of India where the need was the highest. And then they moved to the Western India, in the desert, where there were no organizations, no non-profits, and the need was very high. There was extreme poverty, droughts, and they created a new ashram where I continued living for my rest of my years till I grew up. And again, it was similar principles, similar ideologies of simplicity, of non-possession. And so it was something which I saw during my entire life. My parents, both of them, led their lives in the truest, simplest forms. They both passed away with minimum possessions of their own, and the philosophy that they carried was the only legacy that they left with, or the only belonging that they left with this world. So that's my personal experience. But let me then come to what Gandhian tradition means to us, and how Gandhian tradition is then linked with the theory of simplicity or of non-possession. And since I have been in this circle a few times, I know that many of you are very familiar with India, with Gandhian ideology. I was very deeply moved by Morris' talk on trusteeship and Gandhian thought some time ago. But let me remind you that Gandhi himself believed that the ideas that he is proposing to the world are not his inventions. They are the ideas that have been there for a long time, or forever maybe. What he suggested was that it's a matter of practicing those ideas. It's a matter of keeping those practices alive. And therefore, what he proposed was not new. But he certainly did a lot of work around these values, which one can say were forgotten or were extinct when he was working in his life. Being born in a very wealthy family for that time, and for the context of India in the 19th century, he was raised with a privileged background, with good upbringing, good living conditions, and good education, which his parents could afford. And he was a very ordinary man till that time, and till when he went to the UK for his law education, became an attorney, decided to practice law in South Africa, where he was again continued to be an ordinary man and not a Mahatma. And his experience in South Africa, where he saw racial discrimination and injustice, kind of really lit the fire within him to be what he was then for the rest of his life, and that converted him into Mahatma. And Gandhi was the one who revitalized the understanding of ashram in Indian context or in global context for that matter. And in South Africa, in early part of the 20th century, he established his first ashram, a group of families, group of people in Phoenix in South Africa. And the ashrams were supposed to do a lot of things, but one of the basic principles with which these ashrams would function, thrive, was simplicity, was living simply and with non-possession, and with ensuring that the values that these ashrams were meant for are followed and are kept alive. After spending some time in South Africa, of course, Gandhi decided to move to his homeland, understanding that the nation was going through the similar problems that South Africa was going through, racial injustice, and he then came to India and started participating in the independence struggle of India against the colonial rule. But I remember reading from Gandhi's literature, and as well as from seeing the visuals of his life, that when Gandhi came to India, despite of being an Indian, he had spent a lot of time outside the country, uh, and and he was very keen to jump into the social life of the country. So he then met one of the more renowned social leaders of that time, a gentleman by the name of Gokhale, and he suggested that he's back to India and he's willing to work for the communities. And this gentleman tells him that, do you know India well? And Gandhi says, of course, I am an Indian. I was born in the country and I know the country well. And the reply was that maybe you need to spend some time in understanding the country. Otherwise, you will not be able to do work properly. So Gandhi and his wife Kasturba then traveled across the country for a couple of years in a train, and it's a large country, and the transportation used to be of that pace those days. So this 2 years journey was the journey which taught Gandhi what poverty is, what inequality is, what discrimination is, and what injustice is. There is an instance in the train journey where the train halted near a river for people to go out and do their things, and Gandhi was taking a shower, a bath in the river, and that's the time when he saw a woman was trying to do the same thing with minimal clothes and trying to protect her body. That was the moment which made a defining moment in Gandhi's life, and he decided that he's going to be dressed in the clothes that we see him in the pictures and in his visuals, that being a representative of a country which lives with great poverty, great needs, he is going to live a life of simplicity, as a symbol of the injustice, as a symbol of the poverty that this country or many communities around the world go through, to be the ambassador, to be the voice of this poverty. Uh, as he then continued, starting his journey for India's independence struggle, for which he is known more than anything else. But the reality is that Gandhi's main principle, or Gandhi's main contribution to his work, to his life, was social reforms. He was more of a reformist than a freedom fighter or than a politician. And he then created his first ashram in India, in a place called Wardha, known as Sevagram, and then later on one more ashram in the state of Gujarat, which was his home state, known as Sabarmati, near Sabarmati River, and both these ashrams were the places for him to experiment around simplicity, around non-possession, and around other principles that he followed in his life. Ashram life, because I have lived ashram life for a long time in my life, and we continue to do so in our premises in Gravis, the organization that I am with, has many principles, has many routine practices, and one of those routine practices is to have a prayer meeting every morning. We all gather, we all sit together, we all have a all religion prayer through which we express our solidarity, our faith to every faith, every religion that exists on this planet, so that we can pay our respect to every religion, every following. And then in the prayers, we have something called Ekadash Vrat, which translates to 11 promises in English, or 11 oaths, which was a Gandhian tradition which continues. And in that 11 oaths, non-possession, or asangrah in Hindi, is an important one, which is about simplicity and which is about not possessing materials that are beyond one's needs. So Gandhi truly believed, and we truly believe as the followers of the ideology, that the life has to be simple, because that would lead to resolution of a number of issues that we are surrounded with. And living simply theory has many constituents, has many elements, aspects around which it revolves. A few of them which to me are important. One of them is non-possession, of course, which suggests that the possessions should be according to the needs. Possessions beyond needs is just taking away others' rights. Those who would be in need would be deprived of the commodities, of the materials, of the items, of the goods, excuse me, that they need. So therefore, non-possession should be an extremely important element of life. Secondly, asteya, which is not stealing, and stealing would mean just taking away others' rights by having excessive materials, excessive commodities deposited in people's belongings. That's basically taking away from others' life, and that's something which should be avoided. Simplicity, or living simply life, also emphasizes strongly on self-reliance. At that time in the 20th century, when Gandhi was leading his life, he was also the leader of the India's independence struggle, which is not the context anymore. So at that time, it was about local or locally made products, but not anymore because of this global culture. But the idea was to be self-reliant, which means to be as self-reliant as possible in people in daily life needs, and to reduce dependency on food, on clothing, on the other needs of life. And with these three extremely important principles, simplicity also means that the life needs to be complemented with physical labor, physical work, so that the basic needs of the life can be met by work which is done by the people themselves, and not being dependent on others. And there are a couple of other things which are overarching in the living simply concepts and ideas. One is to be in harmony with nature, to be environment friendly, because nature is beautiful, nature is a gift, and it gives us a lot of things. But when the needs are unlimited, or when the needs are not needs but greeds, they can imbalance the environment, they can imbalance the nature. And the simplicity theory suggests that by being simple, by keeping the life simple, the environment can be protected and can be conserved. And the other overarching thing is this inner peace, self-discipline, satisfaction, to be satisfied, and to be not worried about to be not worried too much about what is going to happen in future, and to be in a mode of saving, accumulating, depositing, and to just be in the present, to live in the present. So this concept gave birth to a lot of voluntary work in India and in different parts of the world, where ashrams were created or non-profits were created. And this concept also led to the trusteeship, about which Morris talked in detail some time ago, during the life of Mahatma Gandhi. In 1930s and 1940s, he was instrumental in laying the concepts of trusteeship. What does it mean? How it is going to be a feature of simple life, and how it is going to help reducing the issues of poverty and of inequality. Based on trusteeship, which means which believes in ensuring that people who have wealth, who have the resources, should think themselves as custodians of social goods and not as owners, and to ensure that they lead their lives with simplicity, and then contribute to social goods by ensuring that their wealth can be used by those who are need in the society, those who are in need, living in great poverty, with problems, with poor conditions. And therefore, gradually we can work towards a more equal, a more equitable world. I think I will speak for 5 more minutes, really, if that's fine, and then, yeah. I will then come to reflecting on how do I look at it personally, in terms of my own understanding, in terms of my own takeaway messages, and what we do as an organization to keep this practice, to keep this theory alive. I believe that there are 3 or 4 reasons why simplicity is extremely important. One, of course, is the issue of poverty. We continue to live in a world which is extremely poor, and unfortunately, the disparities are increasing. The gap between rich and poor, the gap between urban and rural populations, which may be more relevant to India, South Asia, or Africa, is getting wider, and there is a need of maybe not a complete socialism, so to speak, but there is a need of having more sense, more care, and living simply would allow those resources to be somewhat more distributed, more disseminated across different groups. Secondly, health is important for all of us. We all live with a desire to be healthy and to live long, and to be in a position to be contributing to the society and to the world around us. And one of the most important prerequisites to be healthy is to live simple life, in terms of food habits, in terms of physical labor, in terms of possession and non-possession, and it's not just the physical health but also the mental health. And therefore, living simply would certainly lead to healthier lifespans for the people. And the third thing is around the environment. We live in an environment which is constantly being challenged, being degraded. Climate change is occurring at a rapid pace as a contribution to the climate that is made by the human populations around the world. And again, living simply would contribute to the mitigation of climate change and to the adaptation to a great extent. So I believe that by living simply, we can resolve a lot of poverty issues, a lot of health issues, and a lot of environmental issues. Gravis that Renée talked about is creation of my parents, and I'm very fortunate to follow their work. We do reach out to the most needy communities, and living simply is important to us as an organization, as the workers of Gravis who we are who are working for Gravis. We are a group of about 200 people, and we try to be the change that we want to see in the communities. As Gandhi had said, we try to live the life that we want to suggest for people to live based on the theories of simplicity and of non-possession. And while we work in a drought-prone area with the desert communities, some of the important features of our work very directly are related to the simplicity principles. We work with the most needy communities, that is Sarvodaya, all rising but the last person first. Most needy, marginalized, small farmers, farming communities are our target base. We work in direct harmony with the nature. All the work that we do is very, very strongly focused on environment conservation. For example, water and food insecurity are major crisis, being a desert in India. And therefore, our work is extremely closely connected with natural resources. And what we do is around rainwater, around conserving the natural resources, and around practices that would support biodiversity and environmental conservation, and not to deplete the nature. And then thirdly, we are of a belief that harmony should be important element of the work, and that would also not be possible without following the principle of the simplicity theories. Harmony, peace, justice, and equality within the communities is something which is important. We are working with about 3 million people. We are working in a very needy area, and these values, these thoughts sustain our belief, sustain our work as we reach out to more people. Of course, these ideas 100 years down the line, because Gandhi worked in the 1920s, 1930s, they have changed because the context has changed. There is digital world, there are new ways of disseminating information. Societal values have also changed in all parts of the world significantly. But I think the core of the ideology remains the same. The core of the ideology is not changed, and the need of living simply continues to be important for the economy, for the solidarity point of view, for the geopolitical issues that we have around the world. The earth has provided enough to satisfy everyone's needs, but not everyone's greeds, is something that we are fond of saying repeatedly. And therefore, we need to be more justified, more thoughtful about our approaches in life. And living simply is definitely one important vehicles that would take us towards equality and non-discrimination. So I'm looking at the time, and I think it's good time for me to take a pause, and I will be very happy to pass it over to Renée, and will be pleased to engage in a conversation or to respond to any questions. Thank you for your kind attention. Over to you, Renée.
Thank you so much, Prakashji. It's really inspiring to hear about your lifelong endeavors. It lends such a consistency and integrity to what you speak, to know the ways in which you are walking your talk. It's not just book learning. It's not just airy-fairy idealism. It's something that you and all the workers around you are putting into practice. For that reason, it brings so much more reality to this idea of living simply, deliberately, on purpose, than we might have otherwise. It's a deliberate choice that you've made. It's not that you've simply couldn't make enough money, and so you are in a position where you have to live in a very diminished kind of circumstance. No, this is a principle that you live your life on. As a trained medical doctor, you are living in a way that maybe not a lot of other physicians live. So I just want to start out by saying thank you for offering such a sterling example of what you're talking to us about. And then I will open it up for the whole circle. Carolyn.
Thank you for the clarity of your talk. What do you do? How do you approach a person who really believes that if they go ahead and gain all the wealth or land that they can, that that's a good for the society? So they're not interested in limits. They just think they should get out there and gain so much. And maybe they even get a little cantankerous about this. They seem incurably dedicated to selfishness.
I'm not sure if I got the question all right, but let me repeat and then you can let me know if I am going in the right direction. I thought what you said was, how do you deal with people who are not convinced with simplicity theory and who want to accumulate and not share? Is that what you said, or did I get it wrong?
That, and they just think that that priority of gaining as much land or wealth will actually be a way they can do good. And they just don't see the damage that's done when someone puts that kind of priority on their action.
Yes, let me give you an insight first from Gandhi's life, because he continues to be an inspiration. And again in 1930s and 1940s, when he was leading India's campaign on colonial rule, the campaign, of course, required the resources, the money, the support, and he didn't have anything. And the lot of people that he was leading, they required support. Gandhi talked to the wealthy people of that time in India, of Indian origin, and through a process, he was able to convince that the resources that they possessed at that time, the wealthy Indian families, were required to be spent on the social goods, on the needs of the country. And so Gandhi's campaign, while Gandhi continued to live in great simplicity with no possessions, what he did was actually supported by the wealthy families of that time. So that was a process that was successful through regular dialogues, through regular discussions. Gandhi's follower, one of the important leaders in the country, Vinoba, who continued his work after Gandhi's death, and he passed away in 1982, was an engineer of a big movement in the country that facilitated the land donation of from wealthy people to the cause of the needy people. And that was a massive land gift movement, which resulted into thousands of hectares of land donated. So both Gandhi and Vinoba were able to convince the wealthy families, the landowners, the people who had the resources to contribute to the social good. We continue the same path. Of course, Gandhi and Vinoba were very massive figures in their life and had huge social followings. But we take the same principles, take the same ideas, take the same approach, and we are able to convince some people who work with us either in the local communities or across the country or outside the country to believe that there is a social good, there is a social purpose which is important, and therefore they should look beyond their own needs. They should look beyond their own lifespan, because it's also important to understand that eventually there is a life, there is a span which one has to live, and there has to be a vision beyond that. So there are some successes, there are some hurdles, but it's work in progress. And this work in progress will continue in my generation, will continue in the generations that would follow me. I think there would always be a need of constant dialogue between the givers, the seekers, and this momentum will continue. But just to add one more thing, India, of course, has a lot of poverty, has a lot of problems. It's one of the poorest countries in the world, but it also has some domestic wealth. But this idea of giving was not thriving, and therefore the government introduced a law of social giving, which is not there in many countries like the US, where the giving is more voluntary. So the corporate social responsibility law, which mandates people who have large sums of money to give it to social cause. I think such laws help, but eventually the laws need to be made by people themselves, and there needs to be an element of voluntarism, and that would not happen without the dialogue between the givers and seekers, and to make sure that people understand that there is a larger social good behind them. I hope it answers, Caroline.
I wanted to read a little quote from Ramana Maharshi, who himself lived a very, very simple life, and also in an ashram, or sometimes just in a cave by himself earlier in his life. And this came from our week of trusteeship, on which Marie spoke a month ago. And Ramana Maharshi said, having set one's family in consonance with the community, he should make his family prosperous to ensure the prosperity of the community. So this seems very much in keeping also with what you're saying, Prakashji, that it's so important to think beyond ourselves, whatever our stature in terms of wealth may be. How are we using it, and for whom is it being used? Other questions and comments? Yeah, Marianne.
Yes, I just was listening to the social changes of the 20th century with a curiosity, because by the time I became aware of this, well, of Gandhi, but of the striving towards social equality, the leaders of that movement, as far as development, were women in India. Um, and it was tremendous experience that you talked about, that they were really spearheading as they came to the United Dialogue, at least in the Western Hemisphere. So these women in development represented their cultures, their theories, and yet I wonder if it was very difficult in the 20th century for those women to have the wherewithal to speak freely, to own land, to vote, certain things that were restricted even in the Western countries, including the United States. So how did that movement of women's stature coming up come forth? And it makes me just wonder, is it just the innate caring and generosity and living simply that was culturally part of the communities fundamentally? So I just, if that makes sense, trying to translate the power of women's leadership with the innate role they might have had before the social changes happened.
Marianne, I kind of understand the bend of your question, but which group of women are you talking about?
Well, as I'm trying to explain, that in women in development, or so that occurred during the latter part of the 20th century, really were spearheaded as they created momentum along with social movements under the United Nations and the Green Bank work and things that took a more international stage that I became aware of. And so I was working in a man's world, but yet I saw these women leaders coming in from India. And I'm just wondering what the stronghold of the female presence might have been at the time your parents came in, at the time Gandhi was developing his own ashram and also spearheading the independence movement. Or were women just always really a fundamental part of society and recognized as such? Does that make sense? Cliff, maybe you could give the cliff notes of my question.
Well, I don't know about that, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of the women that you might be referring to got very much inspired by the work of Gravis and what they've done to empower women in northwestern India. Because when I went there with my daughter, who spent 6 months or so with you as a volunteer in your NGO, the first thing we did is we got in, we went out into the villages on some motorcycles, and we met these groups of women in the villages who had these leadership organizations and micro industries that were developed for women, because up until that time, it was very much a patriarchal, male controlled environment. And like all the money was all controlled by men, and the men would often leave the villages and go to the cities and leave, and all the hard work, it seemed to be being done by women, but all the fruits of that labor was taken by the men. And so Gravis changed the dynamic a great deal in terms of the leadership in all of these villages. And they were really inspired by our daughter, Sandhya. They always, whenever she would go to one of these villages, she was asked to uncomfortably get up on some platform and give a talk about empowering women. And they were really impressed with the fact that she had graduated, or was in college and was going to graduate from college. And for some reason, it was a great inspiration for them to see this Western woman who, had this quality of self-reliance and leadership and so forth. But it is amazing what Prakash's NGO Gravis has done for the upliftment of women who were basically held down so much. So I just want to speak up for Gravis in terms of the question that you're asking.
I guess the question was, when did that really shift? I mean, or has it just always been there? I guess that was the nature of my question. And thank you for speaking up. It's exciting.
Well, I guess I like to say that I think it's shifting slowly. There's been so much effort by the male side of the world of humanity to keep women, quote, in their place. And I think it's just been, it's held back humanity as a whole because women bring qualities to leadership that are so much more like the idea of a family, or, you know, just nurturing kind of qualities rather than this masculine, you know, egotism that I see exhibited through a lot of male leaders in the world throughout history and including our present time. So I'm glad that you're seeing more women moving into leadership roles, Marianne. That's good.
And
I'm,
from
I'm-
my perspective, looking at Indian culture, the Ramayana is the oldest epic in the world, the oldest. How many thousands, tens of thousands, maybe more years it goes back, we don't know. But you have in that epic a very powerful female character in Princess Sita, who's married to Prince Ram. And for example, when he is banished from the kingdom and told to go live in the forest, she insists on going right there beside him, even though that is going to take her out of all the comforts and protection of the palace that she's living in. And she, to this day, as I understand it, continues to inspire women throughout India by her courage and her resilience. We have also very powerful women who appear in the Mahabharata story, which is from only 5,000 years ago. And they too serve as inspirations. So I think when we're looking at a country as old as India and wondering about the role of women, we have a long way to look. And where they have been maybe several hundreds of years ago versus thousands of years ago, or right now, it can be on a really big sliding scale. But they certainly have strong women characters in their country's ethos through their mythology that permeates the culture from my experience.
I also think that Gandhi himself, through the ashrams, actually created equal rights between men and women. And Kasturba herself, his wife, became quite a strong partner and quite a strong woman in her own rights. And in terms of the Gandhian ethic, you know, in the late, I think it was the late 1960s or early 1970s, Prakash would know, the Chipko movement occurred, where it was women that were chaining themselves to trees. And of course, Vandana Shiva, a tremendous Gandhian warrior, has now created a global movement of protecting the environment and actually acting against development and promoting a more simple, living simply way of life. In fact, her colleague, Satish Kumar, talks about, his book is called Elegant Simplicity, where you can live very elegantly, but very simplistically in terms of resource utilization. And it was kind of interesting because 100 years before the Chipko movement, the person that Gandhi went to see and got turned around, H.P. Blavatsky, in a London lodge, you know, the vegetarians took him to a lodge. And the mystic philosopher H.P. Blavatsky herself wrote about the fact that I don't care if the British are there or not, it's your responsibility to protect the trees of northern India. So it may have been 100 years later before the Chipko movement came about. But even H.P. Blavatsky, who was kind of fundamental in, her students were much fundamental in creating the Indian independence movement to begin with. So there's a whole line of empowerment that's very visible, let alone all the invisible sacrifices that women made throughout the Indian independence movement. I mean, it's not because, so there's been, just to add on to what Renee was saying, a tremendous empowerment, empowering of women throughout Indian history.
And likewise, I'm just beginning to know a little bit more about Wangari Maathai. I'm not sure whether that's how you pronounce her name. In the 1900s and into the 20th century, who's responsible, I think it's called the Greenbelt Movement of Africa. And so she was very, very strong on especially women, protecting the trees, the environment, so that they would be able to, be able to raise their families with the resources of their environment without decimating it. So I think knowing that you have been seeing such women in the world, Marianne, is very inspiring to hear. Prakashji's mother, Sasaji, was certainly one of those people.
If I can make a comment to Marianne's question as well as what Morris was saying, I think gender equality is an important aspect of Gandhian ideology and of the work that we do. And as Cliff said, it's work in progress. It's very slow transformation. Gender inequality has been bridged to some extent, but still a long way is there to go, because these discriminations have existed for a very long time, and therefore the recovery or the resolution will also take some time. But Indian ancient culture obviously was more different, and the women had more dominance. So, for example, we remember our ancient gods as couples, a man and a woman, and the goddess name would always precede the god's name. That's how the Indian culture used to be. For example, Radha Krishna or Sita Ram. It is never Ram Sita or Krishna Radha. But then as time evolved, women were put behind in these scenes. And so the progress is happening, and the work that we do at the community level is extremely important in India as well as across the world. Through community-based interventions, women will come forward. More women in UN dialogues, more women in community dialogues. And my mother was a phenomenal leader. What I saw in her 4 decades ago was phenomenal. The fearlessness that she had, the power that she had, and I wish and I hope that more and more women have that power, more and more women have that autonomy, like they have in the Western world. Like the example that Cliff was giving when Sandhya used to speak in the communities, that was also 20 years ago, so a long time ago. And we get new ideas, new insights as we work on gender equality. And women are important for the environmental causes as well, because the work that we do, Morris, is about preserving nature and regenerating nature and not extracting and depleting what is there. And women have a very important role in that context as well.
Yeah, remembering our daughter Sandhya being around your mother, Sasaji, Sonia would just light up because your mother was such an inspiration for her. And I had a few opportunities to meet your mother as well. And the energy that she gave off was so embracing and so loving that and disarming, I think, to so many people, that she just gave this wonderful, welcoming, loving energy. And I was thinking that if you were to boil down Gandhi's teaching to one word, maybe that word would be brotherhood. And the teaching of brotherhood that Gandhi taught, it seems like it's impossible when you have the idea of superior and inferior. In other words, from the American point of view, we have our Declaration of Independence, and in that it says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. We don't practice it very well here in America, but the idea of human equality, of human brotherhood, it seems like we can't really have that while having this sense of higher and lower, superior and inferior, which that whole idea creates an otherness, which prevents us from experiencing equality and brotherhood, which is something that just your mother and you exude, is this welcoming sense of brotherhood, of community. And so, and then this other idea of Gandhi's of Sarvodaya, that the upliftment of all, but the least first. That's little a footnote to the idea of Sarvodaya, that it has to be the least first. And I'm thinking, when you're trying to pick something up that's heavy, you always get the advice from your mother usually, well, don't pick that up with your back, use your legs. And the idea of trying to uplift others or uplift society, you have to bend down, you have to get below the load you're lifting. So this idea of simplicity seems so fundamental in moving toward greater fellowship, human brotherhood, human equality. And I just, from a philosophical point of view, and Gandhi, you said, lived a symbolic life. Maybe he saw this, that the only way we're going to get toward Indian independence and Indian unity is if we live, if we walk what we talk, we practice what we believe. And I wish we would do that more in America in terms of equality. But this idea of how important simplicity is to moving toward these ideals of equality and so forth, and brotherhood.
So, of course, I have decided that that word is outdated, and I think we should be using siblinghood if we're going to have true equality. Look, my husband's smiling. He likes the idea. I want to share with you a picture that I have of Prakashji's mom from the last time that we got a chance to see her. And doesn't that give you just a remarkable sense of who this person was? Just such a living light.
Yeah, that's a wonderful person.
Yeah. I'd like to tell you about the next week or two at GEMS, while one of you prepares, if you would, to give Prakashji a vote of thanks. Our next week's talk is on the theme of inexhaustible potential. I think of that especially as inexhaustible human potential. I'm working to have a speaker on the ideas and practices of Moshe Feldenkrais, who exemplified in the healing practices that he developed this complete faith in human potential. And yeah, I think I'll stop there and ask if we have a vote of thanks. And another thing we could do is do a quick round of like one sentence takeaways. So we could do either one of those. Let's do one sentence takeaways. Then no one person is on the spot. I see on my screen Maurice, Diana, Bob, Marianne, and Mary, Cliff, and then Kat if she's still there. And Carolyn's at the top right next to me. So Carolyn, Maurice, Diana, Bob, Marianne, Mary, Cliff, and Kat, and possibly Prakash would give us the.
Well, I think it's uncompromising commitment, kind of a lifelong commitment. And certainly he was helped by family members to understand that. So I think that's a wonderful idea to dwell on.
Yes, thank you.
Well, what comes to mind is a fearless compassion. In fact, maybe you can't have compassion unless you're fearless, really.
Mm,
Uh,
thank you. Diana?
I kept thinking about the United States and the inequality that is going on now and all that is happening and how important. Thank you. That was just a beautiful talk, and it was very clear and it was very inspirational. And looking at how do we use our own wealth, whether it be financial, compassion, whatever, emotional, spiritual. How do we use that in our lives? How do I use it in my life to be able to help others in a way that works? And that you talked about changing other people's minds. I don't know if we can really, I can't change millionaires' minds, but what I can do is my part. And so I think that to me is what I'm taking away. So thank you. That was truly beautiful.
Thank you. Bob?
Well, I was thinking about a lot of things, but I remember something that Gandhi said that kind of helps cut through everything. He said, we should live simply so that others can simply live. And I've always loved that expression. And when Renee talked about living deliberately, of course, I thought of Thoreau, who came quite a bit before Gandhi. And he thought that living deliberately was living without complexity or distractions, just cutting through somehow what was really there. And he said, the price of everything is the amount of life you exchange for it.
Mm.
You know, so that thing inside you, the life you kind of give up by this compromise and such. It's interesting. I've lately been thinking about the East focusing not so much on equality as much on family as a metaphor for connection. The net of Indra. We're all connected rather than we're all equal. And I find that very interesting, related to what Carolyn and Maurice were talking about, and of course, Prakesh, what you were talking about essentially. So thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
Marianne?
Those are all beautiful comments, Prakash. Thank you again. It's such an inspiration. My thought of the constant dialogue between the giver and the seeker is very inspirational and helps us in this building of the connection and listening deeply and helping people be seen. So that was a beautiful thing. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Marianne. Mary?
Apologies for being late, but my thoughts were humility and fearlessness. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mary. Cliff?
As always, it's so wonderful to see you, Prakash, and thank you so much for all that you gave us to assimilate on the subject. And you did it with such ease and clarity that it was easy to just take it all in. And I think the reason for that is that you've done what many of us aspire to do, which is to have the mind be a servant of the heart. Because you were speaking with your mind, but it was all coming from your heart. And so it was, and I think that's the only way you can really change. You can never change someone's mind through their mind. You can only change someone's mind if you're centered in your own heart. And so you exemplified that just wonderfully today in terms of the whole presentation. And we're going to be able to think about this and heart feel about this for a long time.
Thank you. Kat?
Hi, Prakash. Thank you so much for that talk. It was very inspiring to hear. Oh, bye. Bye. Yeah, I'm really grateful with the ease that you delivered your message. Bye. And I really appreciate that you today. So thank you so much for giving us your time, your attention, and your incredible words.
Yeah. Thank you, Kat. Prakash, you can get in the last word if you'd like.
Thanks. I love your shirt, Bob. And two sentences. One is that I shared with my colleagues in yesterday's prayer meeting. We do prayer every morning about my attendance in this circle, and I told our colleagues that this is a group that meets every week to discuss various aspects. It's very commendable that you get together every week. It's very inspiring. It's very enriching. So please continue doing this. This is invaluable. And secondly, the takeaway message for me is living simply is important, and it's important for the needs of the world, for the social good, but I think it's equally important for the self benefits. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much, and Prakash, to
Renee, what is your takeaway, Renee?
Oh,
Thank you.
you know, I don't think we see as often in America the lineage passed on down through family members that is coming through so strongly in the Tyagi family. And that fact that, you know, his parents followed Gandhi, and they set up a clear line of life's duty for themselves that Prakashji has taken on, and that he can see his way to that traveling into future generations, whether they're blood generations or not. It's not really the real point, but just that legacy, that following of a strong legacy is very inspiring to see happening.